My mother was dying. Terminal stage lung cancer. She had weeks, maybe days. I was sitting beside her bed in the hospital room, holding her cold, weak hand. She slowly opened her eyes and looked at me with an intensity one had never seen before. "I need to tell you a secret," she whispered. "A secret I've carried for 42 years. A secret that would destroy my reputation, my entire family, if discovered now. But I can't die without you knowing the truth." My heart raced. At 42 years old, I never imagined my mother had secrets. I never imagined there was something in her life she had hidden from all of us. "What secret, Mom?" I asked, squeezing her hand. And then she told me. A story that would forever change how I saw my mother, my father, my identity, and my entire life. If you're here because you enjoy stories involving family secrets, betrayal, identity, and disturbing truths, please subscribe to the channel now. Turn on notifications. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, your city, your country. Because these real stories are powerful. They connect us. They help us understand the complexity of life, relationships, and truth. Now let's explore the story of my life, the life I thought was mine, but was completely false. I grew up in a family that seemed perfect. My father, Thomas, was a respected doctor. My mother, Elizabeth, was an elegant woman who took care of the house and us. We had a big house. We had financial security. We had a life many people envied. My father and mother had been friends with the Bennett couple for over 20 years. Richard and Margaret Bennett were part of our social circle. We traveled together. Our children played together. We were like one big family. But there was something I always noticed, even as a child. There was tension between my mother and Margaret Bennett. A lack of authenticity when they were together. As if both were pretending a friendship that didn't exist. At the time, I was too young to understand. But now, looking back, I realize the clues were always there. When I was 5 years old, my father was frequently absent. He said it was because of work. Long hours at the hospital. Emergency surgeries. Late rounds. My mother seemed depressed during that period. She spent entire days in bed. My grandmother stayed with us for several months to take care of us. My first brother, Daniel, was born when I was 6 years old. He was everything my parents wanted. A healthy, perfect boy. But strangely, there was a distance between my father and my brother. He didn't show the same affection he showed me. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought it was just the way my father was. When Daniel was 3 years old, something changed. My father started spending more time with him. The tension in the house decreased. My parents started touching each other again. They started smiling. That was also when the Bennetts disappeared from our lives. Richard Bennett died in a car accident. It was sudden. Shocking. Margaret didn't appear anywhere after that. She sold the house and moved to another state. My parents never mentioned the Bennetts again. It was as if that friendship had never existed. I grew up. Went to college. Built a career as a journalist. Got married. Had children. Lived a life. And during all those years, I never questioned my parents. Never thought to ask about that strange period. Never cared about the Bennetts' absence from our lives. Until my mother got sick. "You're not your father's daughter," my mother said, her voice so weak I had to lean in to hear. The room started spinning. I hadn't heard correctly. That wasn't what she had said. "What?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what she had said. "You're not Thomas's daughter," she repeated. "You're Richard Bennett's daughter." The world collapsed. I was 42 years old. And in 1 second, my entire life was rewritten. How is this possible? I asked, my voice trembling. "Mom, this doesn't make sense." My mother took a deep breath, a breath that hurt her, you could see from the way she winced. "I had been married to your father for 7 years when I met Richard Bennett," she began. "We had you when we were 25. You were planned. You were wanted. But your father and I couldn't have more children. The doctors didn't know why. After several years of trying, we gave up. We accepted that you would be our only daughter. Then we met Richard and Margaret. Richard was charismatic, intelligent, thoughtful. Everything your father wasn't. Your father was distant, focused on work, rarely touched me. My mother paused, breathing with difficulty. Richard started paying attention to me. He complimented my hair, my dress, asked how my day had been. Things your father never did. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was betrayal. But I was lonely, and Richard was there. Tears streamed down my mother's face as she spoke. We started an affair. It was secret for months. We met at a hotel downtown. It was passionate. It was exciting. It was everything I didn't have at home. And then I found out I was pregnant. My heart raced. She was talking about me. I was the product of this affair. At first, we were scared. Richard wanted me to leave your father, for me to go with him and the child. But I couldn't do that. You were my responsibility. And I loved your father, even though we weren't happy. So I did something terrible. I told your father I was pregnant. Said it was his child. He believed me. Or maybe he suspected, but didn't want to confront the truth. Families have a talent for looking the other way, you know. My mother took another deep breath. Richard wanted to be in the child's life. He wanted me to raise you knowing he was your father. But I couldn't do that. I was too selfish. I wanted you to be mine. Completely mine. So I ended the affair. I ended it abruptly and cruelly. I told Richard the first couldn't anymore. That I had to think about my marriage, my daughter. Richard was devastated. He tried to pressure me. Tried to convince me to leave your father. But I refused. Your mother, Margaret, Richard's wife, she suspected. She saw the way Richard looked at you during that picnic. That passionate, sad way. A mother knows these things. She confronted Richard. He confessed. And their marriage collapsed. My mother paused. She was tired. Speaking cost her great effort. A year later, Richard died. He was driving alone somewhere. Nobody knows where. His car crashed into a tree. They called it an accident. But I always knew it was suicide. And Margaret? Well, she moved away. She cut off contact completely. I think she couldn't look at me. Couldn't look at you. Because you were a reminder of everything she had lost. I was in complete shock. My father wasn't my biological father. My real father was a man who had died when I was 3 years old. A man who had loved my mother. A man whose marriage had been destroyed because of me. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice rough with emotion. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I was afraid, my mother answered. Afraid of how you'd react. Afraid you'd hate your father. Afraid you'd feel like your life was a lie. My life is a lie, I exclaimed. My father isn't my father. My brother isn't my brother. I'm not who I thought I was. You are exactly who you've always been, my mother said firmly. You're my daughter. You're the daughter of a woman who made a terrible mistake, but who has loved you since the day she met you. You're the biological daughter of a man who would have loved you if he'd had the chance. And you're Thomas's daughter, the man who raised you, who fed you, who supported you. Even though he knew the truth. He knew. I asked, shocked. He suspected. Maybe he knew. But he chose to love you as if you were his biological daughter. And that's what matters. My mother closed her eyes. She had said everything she needed to say. The emotion of the story had exhausted her. There's one more thing, she whispered, her eyes still closed. Margaret has a daughter. She'd be 37 now. She would be your biological half-sister. Her name is Sophie. And she's a lawyer in New York. Then my mother fell asleep. And I sat there, beside her bed, my world completely shattered. My mother died 3 days later. During those 3 days, she didn't wake up, didn't speak anymore. As if she had said everything she needed to say and could finally rest. At the funeral, my father, the man I had always called father, even though he wasn't biologically mine, hugged me for a long time. He cried. And when he pulled away, he looked me in the eyes and said, "Your mother told me she talked to you." I nodded. "I knew from the day you were born," he said. "You have Richard's eyes. You always did. But it didn't matter. You were my daughter. And you always will be." If you're as shocked as I was in that moment, if you're wondering how it's possible for someone to keep such a big secret for 42 years, please leave a like and keep following. And tell me in the comments, do you think my mother did the right thing by keeping this secret? Where are you watching from? Because now comes the part where I decide what to do with this information. I spent a month processing everything. I didn't tell anyone. Not my husband, not my children. I just processed. I started researching Richard Bennett. I found an obituary in an old newspaper. Found information about his death. It really was a car accident. Nobody knows if it was suicide or not. I started looking for Sophie Bennett, my presumed biological half-sister. It took time, but I finally found her. She was indeed a lawyer in New York. Had a professional profile. An impressive success story. But she also had a personal blog. And on that blog, she had written about her mother, Margaret Bennett. Margaret had developed Alzheimer's at 60. She spent her last 15 years in a nursing home, unable to recognize her own daughter. She had died 3 years earlier. Sophie wrote about how difficult it had been to care for a mother who didn't recognize her. How painful it had been to lose her father when she was young. How there was a deep sadness in her family that had never been fully explained. I was sitting in front of my computer, tears streaming down my face, reading about my biological half-sister's life, someone who could never have known their own biological father because I had destroyed his mother's life. I made a decision. I would contact her. But how do you explain to someone, "Hi, my name is Caroline. I believe we're biological half-sisters. Our father had an affair with my mother 42 years ago. He died shortly after, possibly by suicide. And your mother developed Alzheimer's, possibly because of the collapse of her marriage." How do you reach out to someone with a story like that? I started writing emails. Deleted all of them. None seemed right. Finally, a year after my mother died, I sent a simple email. "My name is Caroline Smith. I believe you may know some details about your father's death, Richard Bennett. I recently discovered information that may be relevant to your story. Would you like to talk?" Sophie responded within an hour. We agreed to meet at a cafe in New York. She was at a legal conference. We met at a small cafe near her firm. When I saw her for the first time, my heart stopped. She had dark brown hair, green eyes, a strong jawline. And when she smiled, I realized we had the same smile. "Sophie?" I asked, even knowing for certain it was her. She stood up. "Caroline." We hugged. And we both cried. Because we knew, without any words needing to be said, that we shared something profound. We sat down. And I told her everything. About my mother. About the affair. About my real biological father. About how I had discovered all this truth on my mother's deathbed. Sophie listened in silence. When I finished, she asked for a moment. She left the cafe to breathe. When she came back, her eyes were red from crying. "I always knew there was something about my father's death my mother wasn't telling me," she said. She was secretly depressed afterward. And then, a year later, she started acting strangely. Like she was losing her memory prematurely. The doctors said it was Alzheimer's. But I always suspected it was something emotional. That it was trauma. "Now I understand," Sophie continued. "My father loved someone more than he loved my mother. And my mother knew it. And it destroyed her. We talked for hours. We brought photos. I had photos of my real biological father that I had found. Sophie studied them intensely. He looked like you, she said, pointing to my face. Especially your eyes. Do you think he committed suicide? I asked. Sophie thought for a long time. I think he didn't know how to live without the person he loved. And it destroyed him so completely that he couldn't find a reason to keep living. After that meeting, Sophie and I developed a friendship. It wasn't an easy friendship. There was always that knowledge of where we came from, of that betrayal that united our lives biologically. But there was also empathy. She understood my journey because she had lived her own. A year after we met, Sophie hired a private investigator. She wanted to discover the truth about her father's death. What we discovered was disturbing. Richard Bennett had left a note before dying. He wrote about how he had loved someone he couldn't have. How his marriage was in ruins. How he couldn't see a future without that person. He didn't explicitly mention suicide. But the note made it clear that his car crashing into a tree wasn't an accident. Richard Bennett died of a broken heart. And his wife Margaret spent 30 years destroyed by it, before succumbing to Alzheimer's. And me. I lived 42 years of a lie. Today, Sophie and I have a complicated relationship. We're biological half-sisters. But we're also strangers who share DNA. I told my husband. He was understanding, but it changed how he saw me. There was a question about identity we couldn't completely resolve. I told my father, the man who raised me. He said, "You're my daughter. Nothing will change that. And I'm sorry for the years Elizabeth kept this secret from you." I told my children. They were confused initially. But eventually they understood that their biological grandparents weren't who they thought they were. And it affected our family in ways we're still processing. DNA doesn't define who you are. History defines. Values define. Love defines. But truth also defines. And the truth is that my life was built on a lie. A lie my mother kept because she was selfish, but also because she wanted to protect me. A lie that destroyed other families. A lie that led to a man's suicide. A lie that led to a woman's premature Alzheimer's. A lie that made me someone who wasn't who I thought I was. Everyone, if you've made it this far in this emotional journey of family secrets, betrayal, identity, and truth, I want to thank you from the heart. If this story touched you, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Share it with people you think need to hear about life's complexity, about the secrets families keep, about the consequences of betrayal. And in the comments, tell me, do you think my mother did the right thing by keeping this secret? Do you think I did the right thing by contacting Sophie? Also write your city and country. I want to know where this story reached. Because that's why this channel exists. To tell real stories that help us understand each other. To validate the complexity of our lives. Always remember, the people we love most can hurt us deeply. And the secrets we keep can destroy generations. Until the next story.